Hey everyone, 10th Standard students, welcome to your Ultimate Exam Prep Masterclass. Seriously, I am so pumped to be here with you today because, well, we're going to completely conquer Chapter 17 together. That's right, we are diving deep into the 1857 Revolt, the first war of Indian independence. We're going to strip away all that dense academic jargon and build a really rock-solid understanding so you are fully prepared for those board exams. Let's get right into it.
Okay, look at this prompt. Explain the economic causes for the First War of Indian Independence. This right here, this is an absolute favorite question for the examiners. I mean, it pops up constantly on board exams, and it usually carries a hefty 6 marks. But don't worry, by the end of this quick explainer, you're going to have the perfect high-scoring answer totally locked in your brain, complete with a ridiculously simple memory trick.
So, to make sure you actually retain all this, we've got a super clear 5-step blueprint for Chapter 17. We'll start with the exam blueprint, then dig into the causes of the revolt, track its eruption and spread, analyze the reasons for failure, and finally look at the effects and the Queen's declaration.
All right, part 1, the exam blueprint. Let's get the big picture sorted first.
You've got to always remember this key distinction, especially for those tricky 1-mark objective questions. Indian historians, they proudly call this massive 1857 uprising the First War of Independence because of its sheer scale, right? Meanwhile, the British historians desperately tried to downplay the whole thing. They literally just called it a Sepoy Mutiny, kind of acting like it was merely a small, contained rebellion by a few angry soldiers. Knowing this difference is absolutely crucial. Moving on to Section 2, the causes of the revolt. Let's break down the powder keg.
Okay. The most critical political cause you must memorize is Lord Dalhousie's Doctrine of Lapse. Basically, the British created this incredibly ruthless loophole. It stated that if an Indian king died without a biological child, his kingdom just didn't go to his adopted son. Instead, it naturally merged right into the British Empire. Imagine we're drawing this out on a whiteboard, okay? Step 1, you draw a king, and if he dies without a biological son, boom. Step 2, you draw a giant red X over his adopted son. The British reject his claim entirely. Step 3, the British just drag that crown straight into their own empire. Because of this exact policy, massive princely states like Satara, Jhansi, and Udapur were completely stripped of their power. You can literally imagine how furious this made both the royals and the lakhs of soldiers who depended on them. Wait, pause here, because this brings us to a huge, and I mean huge, common student mistake. When the exam asks for causes, do not mix up political causes with administrative causes. You got to keep them neatly separated in your mind. Political causes, those involve kings and nawabs losing their titles and lands. Administrative causes, those deal with the common people suffering under unfair civil and criminal laws, heavily biased British judges, and courts that suddenly operated entirely in English, a language the commoners literally couldn't understand. All right, let's tackle that beast of a 6-mark question regarding economic causes. How are you going to remember all these points under pressure? Just use our memory trick. HAWT, hot. Because of the Industrial Revolution in England, Indian industries were decimated. H, handicrafts suffered heavily. A, artisans became completely unemployed. W, weavers lost their jobs and became the first victims. And T, heavy taxes were imposed on Indian goods being sold in England. Just write down HAWT on your scratch paper and boom, you've got 4 solid points. But to really secure those final top marks for economic causes, you've got to mention the plight of the farmers. Point out that the British appointed this thing called the Enam Commission. This commission cruelly took back Enam lands, which, remember, were lands originally given as gifts. This left the farmers completely financially ruined and feeling deeply, deeply insulted. Add in the fact that zamindars were ruthlessly exploiting them, and there you go, you have a perfect full marks answer. Finally, the military causes. Look, the Indian sepoys were literally the backbone of the British Army, yet they endured pathetic conditions. They were given a lower status, terrible pay, and almost 0 chances for promotion compared to the British soldiers. And the absolute last straw, they were forced to cross oceans to fight in foreign lands, which, at the time, severely hurt their religious sentiments. Which brings us to Section 3, eruption and spread. The powder keg was completely full at this point. The kings were angry, the farmers were broke, the weavers were unemployed, and the soldiers were totally insulted. So what was the immediate cause? Examiners loved this one. It was the introduction of a new weapon, the Royal Enfield rifles.
But actually, scratch that. It wasn't really the gun itself. It was a horrific rumor that spread through the barracks like wildfire. The rumor was that the cartridges used in these new rifles were heavily greased with cow and pig fat.
And this perfectly illustrates why it was the absolute breaking point. It directly and simultaneously attacked the deep religious beliefs of both major groups in the army. For Hindu soldiers, cows are considered highly sacred. For Muslim soldiers, pigs are religiously prohibited. And to load the rifle, soldiers literally had to bite off the ends of these greased cartridges, forcing them to violate their most sacred religious boundaries. No way were they going to accept that.
Now, when you're asked about the spread, just trace this geographic timeline in your mind. Day 1, the spark erupts in Barrackpore. By week 1, soldiers in Meerut openly refused to use the bullets, leading to mass arrests and then a violent prison break. The freed soldiers then marched straight to Delhi. They stormed the Red Fort and actually declared the Mughal king, Bahadur Shah II, as the Emperor of India. From there, the whole thing just spreads like wildfire to major centers like Kanpur and Jhansi.
But think about this for a second. This is a major narrative pivot. The Indians had the numbers, they had the fury, and they took over major cities. So why did such a massive subcontinent-wide uprising collapse? This is another huge high-weightage question you've got to be ready for.
Let's get into Section 4, Reasons for the Failure. To easily write down 6 perfect points for why this revolt failed, just memorize this acronym, NOPLAN, no plan. Why did it fail? Because they had no plan. N, it was not spread to the whole country. The South stayed mostly quiet. O, organizational skills were severely lacked. P, poor leadership and direction. They didn't have one unified military genius leading the charge. L, lack of unity. Crazy enough, some Indian kings actually supported the British. A, aim was focused on self-interest. A lot of leaders just wanted their own kingdoms back rather than fighting for a newly united India. N, it was not a planned revolt, it just erupted suddenly due to that cartridge rumor. Memorize NOPLAN and you are totally set for this question.
Okay, last part, Section 5, Effects and the Queen's Declaration. Despite the failure, the British were terrified.
Seriously, if you remember only one political effect from this entire chapter, the absolute biggest takeaway you must write down is this. The 1857 revolt completely ended the rule of the British East India Company. The British Parliament realized a private trading company could no longer control India. So they handed power directly over to the British Crown. The Secretary of Indian Affairs took charge. It was a massive structural shift.
So to calm down this massive, simmering anger across the country, the Queen of Britain passed a really crucial declaration in 1858. She promised that all agreements with local kings would be respected and there would be no more regional expansion, meaning that awful doctrine of Lapse was finally dead. She promised a stable government, equality before the law, and most importantly, after the whole cartridge incident, strict non-interference in Indian religious issues. And there you have it, the First War of Indian Independence, fully decoded. With the HAWT and NOPLAN mnemonics securely in your toolkit, how ready are you to absolutely crush Chapter 17 on exam day? I'd say, very ready. But beyond the exam, I want to leave you with this one thought. If 1857 was the failure that taught India how to fight, how much did the lessons learned here directly pave the way for the final successful push for freedom 90 years later? Keep reviewing, stay confident, and happy studying.